Black belt barristers going into some really, really, really deep, technical, complicated legal jargon, basically about equality and all the laws around, sports and discrimination and things like that. He's tied it in with J.K. Rowling and all the latest Scottish police hate crimes business and so forth. He goes into really, really, really complicated stuff about, what constitutes I think it's overcomplicating it. And I think that what it comes down to is it's a lot of mental masturbation about it's kind of like trying to be really like you're getting into the level of like television monitor circuitry and how do you assemble a monitor to show a picture and all like that. He's going through it's so complicated reels and reels of argument, right, that to be honest, when you immediately get a jury there and say that actually you can argue the definitions and terms and meanings and what is abhorrent, what is hate, what is dislike, and how much it proportionately affects this person or that person. At the end of the day, this comes down to people's opinion, and what the barristers are trying to argue between each other to a judge, right, is really the value of something. What is the value of this word or even opinion or this if someone comes out with an opinion or a point or a speech or images or whatever, it's all weighing things up, but through what did you intend, what did you mean, what's the value of it. A lot of the time they're trying to kind of, it's almost like putting gold on weighing scales, and trying to weigh it and all, and then do chemical analysis of it, and so on. It's only like 68% gold, and it's got all this other stuff in it. And they're trying to kind of measure and balance all these things that some people might not have even intended to measure or balance it anyway, but they're going to measure and balance it nevertheless. It's almost like on Domesday when they went around, devaluing everyone's property and saying, oh, they're only worth half as much. It's almost like, your comments that are your opinions, they're kind of like saying, oh, no, how harmful is this, or how unfair was it to someone else? And then at the end of the day, like we said, every different person actually has a different idea and opinion themselves of all these things anyway. And the lawyers are trying to make out that they completely understand and can value meanings, words, opinions, and interpretations to such a detailed and precision degree that, to me, when you go into Crown Court in front of a jury, and then the jury can actually, regardless of the persons and case presented to them and what the law is and means, they can actually just make a decision purely based on their own conscience and what they think. And the jury's meant to be a random array of people who are mixed of conscience and opinion anyway, and they can decide it purely based on their own opinion. To me, you're starting to, the amount of money that these lawyers are making out of the work they're putting in to try and measure these things and pull them to bits, and what the ministers in court, the ministers in Parliament are doing to people by doing this, and on the police resources and so forth, it's to me, it's really starting to get annoying. And the worst thing out of it, right, is this. So, for example, right, we've got a mixture of different kinds of people in the country. How is it, right, that if you have a country, for example, that is predominantly white people, right? Predominantly white persons, for example, right? How is it, right, that the organisation of the country between rich and poor, how is it that with all the working class and the Labour Party, right, how is it that through all the complicated and technical explanations, right, if you were employing the intelligence and the arguments and the calculations and the intellect of someone like blackbelt barrister, right, into and employing them and putting them to a task on behalf of like the working class or the poor people, right, if you were going to employ these barristers going on what they're talking about to do with, like, you know, hate or sex crimes and the harm caused and weighing it all up proportionally, but according to what the law says, it's only to what is written in the law and what the law says by what Parliament have put through, right? If you were going by the conscience of the public, which is like, it could be the working class, right? In a court, and if you had a civil court or even a criminal court, let's say you had a jury in a magistrate's court or a jury in a civil court of civil request or any court where you've got an array of jury, right? If you put a case before the entire public with these barristers there arguing a case, right, to justify, should one portion of the public, the rich, like Rishi Sunak, for example, and all his peers, is it fair with the harm caused, right, to the public and the poverty caused and the disproportionate effects on society, is it actually harmful? And is it actually unethical and unfair for the to even have a working class that is any different than this rich elite? You know, considering all the monies they've got in excess, all the, you know, trillions at their disposal, and even the policies of a, you know, I'm in charge, I'm in control, you'll do as I say and work. How ethical is that if you're starting to get in all these policies on equality and fairness? To me, it just doesn't add up. To say the realm of argument and the realm of legal complete jargon that these people are going into, just the detail, right, that they're going into to win an argument over something like gender and be treated equally or fairly. If you employed these logics and these arguments and this complexity in these legal cases to the question of, are the workforce being undermined, mistreated, and possibly even abused by the concept of this rank, a financially modelled framework of this, each person can command another person or is in charge of them. And then you might go to qualifications, but when you if you tested those qualifications out really and based them on morals, which is what a jury's meant to have, conscience, how can you have a conscience where you have a person? I'll try and boil it down and narrow it down, right? Let's use black belt barrister. How does black belt barrister justify a conscience where he will go in for an hour's worth of work, right, to do something, and who values it at £1,000? That's £1,000. Then someone goes into a factory and weaves a basket or makes something, right? This is like manual labour and skilled labour, right? And that's only worth, £8.50 or whatever. But where's the morals in that? Oh, it's skill. But the worst thing is, these type of people who are coming out with these arguments in court, they're coming out with these debates, right? But it's all based around what the letter of the law says. These are rules set out by the government. What is the real moral behind it? Well, the government's trying to dictate what the morals are. The government's trying to legislate, we'll tell you what the morals are, and we'll tell you what is proportionate or not. But when it comes down to it, it's a jury with conscience. And this is why, right, in a civil court, I'm going to put a complaint to the Lady Chief Justice soon, because this is why they've removed the civil juries. This argument, right? Because no conscience of any random array of people that claims to be a random array of people, the random peer opinion of the public, right? No random peer public opinion would ever go into a civil court and sit in a case with black belt barrister or anyone else, right, when they're bickering and arguing about who's going to get the, £10 million when the wife and husband split up from a business, right? Nobody, no civil jury would grant. Why would the wife come out with money, supposedly, if she's just for marrying the guy, right? And she should suddenly get, half his fortune. The children. Well, who's having the children? These kind of conscience decisions or morals between money, massive amounts of money, when some people have a little amount of work or a large amount of work. Well, black belt barrister, I'm a skilled barrister. I've got really complex arguments and strong points, and I understand all these things down to a great detail. But the jury, at the end of the day, right, you can have a salesman a used car salesman or whatever, and he can sell, you could find something in an auction, right? And this is the model behind the auctions, knocking the hammer down, bidders coming in with the highest bid. Someone could walk out of there paying, 10 grand for something. But depending if someone else didn't want it and no one else was that bothered about it, you could end up selling that piece for £100, right? It's always down to the highest bidder, It seems to me that when it comes actually down to conscience and fairness, governments are making all these new laws because they're purporting or pretending that it's supposed to be upsetting someone or some harm done, or it's unproportionate. The punishment has to be proportionate to the thing. But some of these things are even considered illegal, And then if one person doesn't even think that's harmful, it's a hell of a lot of police resources and money, and it's a hell of a lot of money to barristers when you can have a jury who are meant to decide. They're guided and advised by the law, but ultimately they really have their own opinion on what value is. So, but then someone has paid black belt a value of, X £1,000 when that doesn't even have to be taken into account. It really is starting to become like some sort of auction. It wouldn't stand, as far as I'm concerned, right? I just cannot believe how we've had basically, right? How has English society through the courts managed to not obtain a fair balance between rich and poor, so that there aren't really any rich and poor, because it's unfair to have rich and poor. You could say that why, just because someone's got more skills, that's more better value to society. But it doesn't, to me, it doesn't add up, because I think that the removal of the civil juries and the magistrates' court juries is a very significant thing, because you've ended up actually not with the true opinions of the public in most matters. And you've ended up with these barristers who are making a hell of a lot of money and arguing for party A, party B, and a lot of corporate entities. And really, you know, they've been regarded as peers. They don't think that the public should decide with its conscience on their affairs, their private affairs, and therefore they think that money should decide it. And if they can buy a lawyer with a more complicated argument like black belt barrister, then, you know, it's the money that pays. Who can pay for the lawyer who can argue the most argument? But all these civil matters and civil disputes, as well as criminal, are meant to be decided on what the public think, right? You know, and that would balance rich and poor, and, you know, all these homeless people issues and problems would all be balanced and sorted out. The reason why we've evaded a balanced society where is very fair and there's a lot of equality and people are more equal, is because they started removing the juries from the courts. And that's why the working class really have remained the working class. I don't think the Labour Party have done anything to help the working class. They've actually championed people like David Beckham. They've coerced the working class to want to become Tory and go over to the other side, while maintaining the working class to continue to be the working class, or they wouldn't be the working class anymore, right? And yet, what we get is, we get all this influx of foreign people, particularly people of colour, as they call them in America, right? And these people of colour, what they've done is they've managed to really, right, what the people of colour have managed to do is use their colour and discrimination as a point, a argument point of why they should be treated equal, right? And they've managed to use that discrimination point to make sure that they can get all these positions and jobs in these companies and businesses equal, like the suffragettes did with the voting, right? The women did, and access to lots of money and respect and being treated equal. They've used a discrimination point on that in order to bargain or argue or demand even to be treated what this thing is called equal. But the working class itself has failed to do that on the discrimination point of being poor. And that is something astounding. It means that being poor and the inequalities of finance or even class, as the poor people haven't managed to demand or bargain or negotiate proper equality, but the people of colour have in their dispute at large with the public nationally. So And I think that the public, on the discriminatory point of wealth and how they're treated in rank and file in business, you're the servants, we're in charge, or you will obey, not, it's not like a round table consensual agreement, right? In business, I think that has happened because the elite pulled the working class out of the courts and out of the civil courts because they didn't believe that they should be judged by those people, right? They shouldn't be judged by poor people because they are a different class of people. But yet, if you use colour as a different marker for it, they've managed to swing it equal over the point of colour or race or religion. But the working class have not been able to get this equality through wealth. And in order to argue it, you have to pay a black belt barrister, money. The people of colour and religion and race never really needed to hand money over to people like black belt barrister. They've actually managed to do it just on the point that that they're a different race or class or religion. And they've had people who have agreed with it in government. But why didn't the Labour Party manage to do that for the working class? Why didn't they level the whole playing field? They must not have wanted to, I really, really think that. And another thing is people in power and with wealth and money, they've actually coerced a lot of people of colour to desire and want those positions. Really, I think that the people of race, religion and colour have wanted equality in a way. They have been given or negotiated equality, and then it's now been put through law more than everyone else has been able to get it in finance and social class. And I think it's one of the reasons is, firstly, I think that a lot of the people of colour, race and religion from other countries are less tolerable and less kind of like easygoing either way. I think that people of Britain and England and maybe Europe are more, they've allowed and let the other people to take all the money and things and create inequality because they're more actually agreeable. If they weren't as agreeable, they wouldn't have done it. But I don't think the people from other countries and of colour and so forth, when they come here, they don't put up with it, which means they're less tolerable. But then they're getting all their less tolerable laws put through the legislation. But we've been less opposed to them actually coming here and accepting them. But then if they would have been as intolerable about financial equalities and class equalities as they have been about their racial inequalities, then a lot of the problems would have been solved to do with, money, rich and poor, and a lot of these health problems and everything else. It's the Scottish government with their laws that they're putting through on freedom of speech and hate and so forth. It's just ridiculous. In terms of if you applied the exact same logic and principles and arguments that they're using for the hate and simply applied them to other discriminatory points like financial discrimination and class discrimination that even exists, it would just tear the peerage system to pieces. How are they resisting it, and how are they getting away with it? I don't think that they would, if they'd have kind of still had the jury in the civil courts and in the magistrates' courts. Those magistrates in the magistrates' courts and the lower courts have been absolutely destroying conscience when it comes to normal amounts of crimes all through since the 1800s, annihilating it. There is no fair Magna Carta judgment by peers, I'll tell you that. And when it comes to the courts of civil request and the civil courts, the elite, the peers, the unfair and the discriminatory classes, the peers have extracted the means by which the public should have had in place to keep a very balanced check on their business finances and excesses and greeds, their social and economical imbalances. And that's by design. But they've allowed and encouraged foreign people to come in and many different religions, and then they've encouraged them to mix in the classes and even join those upper and higher classes, but they've completely and totally ignored the social imbalance and division. I think it's criminal. I just can't take Black Belt Barrister seriously. I mean, he's definitely got intelligences that I don't have. But there are intelligences that I know that I have that Black Belt Barrister either doesn't want to entertain, or he is unwilling to go into, or doesn't get. And a lot of them, as soon as you switch the dial of what is the particular discrimination that we are debating, if you switch the dial, right, what is this argument about? What is the particular point of discrimination, right? If you have a dial that's on hate or race or colour or religion, and then suddenly switch the dial, right, to financial inequality or rank, class, peerage inequality, right? Suddenly, right, if you start making laws governing that as the same as they're governing hate and other things, it would literally cream the top of the whole thing. But they don't want to do that because a lot of these ministers and political parties, including Labour, they actually believe in inequality. They actually champion inequality. They champion discrimination. They are champions and advocates of financial inequality, of social inequality when it comes to class and peerage inequality. And they didn't want the working class to be their judges in courts because they believe that if you own a business like Warburton's or whoever it is, right, bread factory or whatever, you have a right not to be judged by the working class. Apparently, even though they haven't been quite entered into the House of Lords, almost like you deserve 2 votes if you're a landowner. And because they are completely evading all legal scrutiny and liability, and who would bring those legal cases? People who have got money. Well, you wouldn't need money to bring those legal cases. They bring their own legal cases aplenty when they're squabbling between each other in their multi-billion-pound business deals. But if you suddenly had the public in the jury, that they are their peers, by the way, I tell you what, if you're mixing in anyone you want from around Europe into a jury, whether they're, Sikh, Hindu, Buddha, Islam, whatever, Buddhist, right, and you're saying that's a fair jury, then why not have rich people, poor people, or whatever in it? The Conservative Party, the Court Party, the peers did not want people of low money and finances judging civil cases in courts because they wouldn't like the conscience and verdict that people were coming out with, because you don't have a conscience if you are a multi-billionaire. Not on the level of other people when it comes to fairness, right? It's almost like if if the working class, right, had a colour, you know, I don't really want to use black as a colour. Let's say red. If their skin was red, if everyone who was working class was born with red skin, right, then life would be different, because, you know, it's like if you had a factory where all the working class were Indian, right, in England now, and all the it would be like that's what happened with the African slaves in America. They were all black. All the slaves and workers were black. And what happened is they had a civil war about it, because all the, you know, tobacco field owners and the plantation owners were white, and it turned out that they were turning all the black African slaves into their well. So that is when you could see it working. All these black people are being treated like slaves, and the white people are in charge. So what happened is, because it was a racial discrimination, and a class and finance discrimination, there was a civil war about it, and they actually abolished it. They abolished it. Slavery. So how come they haven't abolished the working class in England, but still yet? Completely. When all it takes is, you know, a few, 10, 20 years of immigration, and they've literally nearly abolished it's been easier for them to abolish the just conscience and opinion of a national identity, because the influx of foreigners in didn't like it. They don't like it. The influx of foreigners, well, actually, I might as well chuck Scottish people in as foreigners. Might as well say Nicola Sturgeon. If Nicola Sturgeon would have been as obsessed with eradicating the elite and forming a complete equal financial spectrum across level across the whole nation, right? And no rank, no one is an executive, no one is an owner. Everything is equal, but then they call that communism. But they want everyone to be equal because of colour of skin or religion, and they want everyone to act and behave the same within this certain parameters of conduct which they think so right. But they haven't pulled Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg out of the extreme parameters of financial inequality. And that money would have probably made a lot of people less angry and abhorrent. It just... I've had enough of this Scottish government. I have literally had enough of them. They are criminals. There is lots of things they're doing illegal, and Black Belt Barrister is wrong when he's talking about, oh, there are certain rights that you can and can't take away. You can't actually take away any of the rights in the Bill of Rights. And when I mean to say that, the ministers can't do it. They're writing down things now, and no one's challenging them in Parliament because it's all being fought out in the courts. The problem is that you can get ministers prosecuted for corrupt and illegal practices in the Supreme Court for subverting the rights and liberties, and no one like Black Belt Barrister or anyone wants to get ministers prosecuted, and they can be, regardless of their privilege, they can be. Judges, ministers and councillors, there are offences in they're not allowed to remove or change those rights, because there's a certain... They're required for the operation of the conscience. They are required for the operation of the conscience of the individual.